Here's at Harvard we have these rules. You have to tell us who you are, sort of like why you're not why, like what do you do, and ask a question. And the questions do not have a speech with a question mark at the end. They're short, brief, and end of the question mark. So obviously we've got one gentleman. All right. You're going to be a great leader, a great example for all the gentlemen behind you.
All right, I'll shrink down what I said.
And you can ask about anything, politics, policy.
My name's Sebastian. I'm a solo attorney. Technically, I am a small businessman. My question, I guess, is generally both parties agree to some level that the deficit is an issue, and every independent body that looks at it, most famously Simpson Bowles, says if you're serious about the deficit, you have to both raise taxes and take on Medicare. And I've been waiting for a Republican to admit that you have to if you want to solve the deficit. I'm waiting for a Democrat to admit that you have to take on Medicare if you want to solve the deficit. And
so whatever tonight's going to be the night.
We can do it here. You get it done.
That's the question.
Yeah, I guess that's my question. Yeah, to the Republicans, is that feasible? And if so, why is Simpson Bowles wrong? And to you, is it feasible? Do you have to do Medicare? And if not, why is Simpson Bowles and similar things wrong?
Okay, great, thanks. Thanks, guys. Let's see. I'll let you guys go first on this one, because I think that's what we're doing. No, your guys are first, because I went first with the first one.
Just a note about Simpson Bowles, the president set this program up and, they were going to find a solution. They were going to fix it finally. And this independent body with a Republican and a Democrat, and I happen to love Alan Simpson, so I was very, very excited. I was tickled pink. And they came out with this program, and I read it, and I thought, this makes sense. Like, this is a really good starting point. Actually, I think Paul Ryan also had a really good starting point, but apparently not everybody agreed with me. That's beside the point. Anyway, it was a really good starting point, and it was ignored. Completely and totally ignored by the president who set it up, by the Democrats who endorsed it, even to some extent a lot of Republicans. It was just ignored. And I know that doesn't entirely answer your question. I think Jeff, the economist over here, probably has a far better answer, but I just wanted to point that out about Simpson Bowles. President Obama was, his plan to fix it was this independent body, and they gave him a plan, and as with most other things in his administration, it just died a slow, painful, and hideous death.
I can't believe I'm on a panel where somebody else is bashing Obama more than I do. So, to answer your question, there's two things. Obviously, Medicare has to be addressed. It is not even an option, and it really stinks because when you have the climate that we're in right now, because you have Democratic candidates and elected officials campaigning on the fact that we're not going to touch Social Security and Medicare. And it's very reckless. It's reckless because in a few years, not 5 or 10, more like 2 or 3, we're going to have to start taking a chainsaw to Medicare if we don't reform it, because it's going to consume so much of our federal budget. So when you have Elizabeth Warren saying the only thing she cut is defense and agriculture grants, it's burying your head in the sand. It's just reckless. And then you have Paul Ryan come out with a plan that addresses Medicare and is vilified, and they do videos of him pushing grandma off a cliff, which is what it comes down to. So you have the Democratic Party scaring people into that you're going to lose your Medicare, but the reality is if we don't fix it, everybody's going to lose their Medicare. Now, the second part is that raising taxes. Now, I'd like to separate the difference between raising taxes and raising revenue, because they are two different things. How does the government get the most amount of money? Now, if you listen to folks who are very progressive, socialist on the left, they will say you jack the tax rate up to 90% and you get those evil 1%ers and soak the rich. That won't get you the revenue that you need, because what that does is it pulls more money out of the economy and things slow down. So when you have one side of the aisle is saying, we're going to raise tax rates, and the other side of the aisle says, well, you don't really get a lot of money that way. You do it by lowering the rates, broadening the base, getting more people working and paying in, and that's actually how you get more money. Now, the phrase you hear a lot is, spend money on a tax cut. George Bush spent money on a tax cut, and it's a little known fact that when he cut those taxes, when he cut those tax rates, the Treasury actually collected more revenue than it had in the history of our country. So there's this, what do you do? There's a reason why economies that fail across the globe, when they jack their tax rate up to 70, 80, 90%. So it's sort of like finding that sweet spot of how much revenue you can get. And what it comes down to is the government at any level gets its money on the transaction. It gets its money when people buy things, when people pay other people to work, and money is moved around. That's how the government collects it. Because everything's frozen, nothing gets done. And you get these childish arguments by people who really do know better. And I think Elizabeth Warren even knows this fact, but she has to play to the body politic and say tax the rich. So that you're right, we do need to raise more revenue, but how do you do that? And that's where we kind of diverge in our opinions. Jack the tax rate up, or you lower the rate, broaden the base, and get more people paying in. And we do have to address Medicare. So those are the two big cost drivers, and we are rapidly approaching that fiscal cliff if it's not addressed.
John, Tina.
Sebastian, I agree. Not only do we agree, I think third or fourth time tonight, but I think on both points, I think, well, number one, we're not going to raise tax rates to 90%, so let's not scare everybody. We're talking about a couple of percentage points, and we're talking about temporary tax cuts being, allowing them to be temporary, not permanent tax cuts, for those that are the top 1%. But I'm sure we'll get back to that. Jeff's going to school me on that one, right? Yeah. So the good news is we're not talking about raising tax rates to 90%. We're talking about 1 or 2 percentage points. The other good news is that the Healthcare Reform Act that was passed actually did begin to address the cost of Medicare. So as a Democrat, I will absolutely agree that we need to reform Medicare further, but we are addressing it. I think the states are a good model for how to address things at the national level. We're trying that in Massachusetts. We're trying to figure out a way to reduce costs and reduce the healthcare burden in the state. So I would say, yes, we need to address it further. I think we've started to do that on the issue of Medicare. And I would say to the Simpson-Bowles and whether or not we should be raising taxes or raising revenue, I think one of the biggest issues, and somebody we haven't mentioned yet tonight, and of course I will be the one to do it, is everybody's favorite Republican, Grover Norquist, who has asked many Republicans to sign a pledge not to raise taxes. And tonight's about President Obama, but we've heard a couple of mentions about the Senate race in Massachusetts. It's no surprise, it's one of the biggest races in the country. Senator Brown has signed the pledge, and so the country's handcuffed. Congress has handcuffed us. We can't do anything on taxes. We can't raise any revenues from increasing taxes. We can only cut. I don't think that's a starting point for any discussion between two political parties. I think you have to be able to say, in the president's plan, again, don't cite me, don't ask for the citations, although I'll get them to you if you give me your email. The president's plan is for $2.50 of cuts in spending for $1 of revenue raised. And Senator Brown said, not even a 10-to-1 ratio would I sign that. So, I mean, where's the starting point, I guess, is my question. But to answer your question, yes, absolutely, let's make some more changes to Medicare moving forward.
Very briefly, I'm certainly not an economist, but as far as Medicare goes, one of the best things that we can do, not only for our nation, but as a nation, is preventative health care, which Obama has done so much for over the last 4 years, working on healthcare reform and working on Medicare reform. These things all lead to less medical expenditures throughout the country. Less need to up insurance rates, less need to have costly care that people can't afford. I mean, I think that something as simple as getting your physical every day, or every year, sorry, getting a physical every year will lead to lower costs later in life.
Ross, I just thought, I'll let you guys come back.
Oh, you brought up the Senate race, now you've really stepped in it. Tina, you're adult, and I'm going to respond specifically to John. I've actually met Grover Norquist a number of times. He is a very kind individual. I never understood why Democrats spend so much time vilifying someone because they don't want to raise taxes. Professor Warren's constant complaint in this campaign is that Scott Brown won't raise taxes, as if that's something that he should be ashamed of. Personally, I think it's something that he ought to be proud of, and he is proud of. And I think it's also remarkable to me, she really can't run against Scott Brown because Scott Brown is such a perfect example of what people want in their senators. So instead, she scores political points by running against Jim Inhofe, who is the senior senator from Oklahoma, and I can't speak for Jeff, but somebody that I certainly don't have any, political things in common with him. She scores political points by using people like him and people like Grover Norquist to scare the people of the Commonwealth into voting for her because she can't sell herself. So the closest that she can get is by bringing up other people and comparing them to Senator Brown. I think it's appalling to me when you reach the point in politics when you literally are so desperate that you can't say good things about yourself and your plans and what you're going to do. The only thing that you can do is vilify other people who don't live in Massachusetts, who don't vote in Massachusetts, who have little to nothing to do with Massachusetts politics. That's the point that it's become, and I think it says a lot about her and her campaign.